Okay, Graham, thanks very much for sending in your dissertation's final draft. Just a few points I'd like to make, and we'll go through them now. First of all, in page one, let's just bring this down. I'm not particularly happy about the idea of a question as a title for something, so I've got rid of the question mark and just called it closer to fewer. I made it a statement, that's all. So that's the first thing. Next one is page 3, so we'll just whip through. What I've done is I've moved the whole of this section. Okay, I think that's quite nice is this general background, and that could slot into behind this, and I've moved all of the aim, objectives and hypothesis after this section, so you've got a feel for the whole thing. The next thing is I've got rid of this dissertation will seek. In fact, it just does conduct, because it does what it says it does. So be positive in your language. Alright, so if we come down to page 5 and 6, you'll see that after this section I've put the aim and objective down. And I've classified it as an aim, and then gone through what the aim is. Objectives, I haven't changed them, I've just moved them, just slightly changed them so you can see what they are. And that's it, finished. Okay? There's nothing else I want to think about at this section. I'm now going to come through to the next part, which is page 16, where there's some comments. Yeah, what you've done here is at the end of this section you've made a review of a particular book. I forget what the title is, I can go back and have a look at it. What I need you to do here is write a sort of summary of the whole of your literature review. Now, I don't want anything more than 3/4 to a page tops. Even half a page will be plenty, because what you're supposed to do from your literature review is you're supposed to be able to build the model for your questionnaires. So what I've said here is go back, look at your questionnaire that you produced, and it brought out a number of points that you wanted to test. Now, the theory of this is that the reason you've got those questions is an outcome of the literature review. So what you then do is, in the summary, you summarize all of the main points that you found in the literature, which basically equates to the questionnaire you've produced. Okay? So just a summary of the main points of the questionnaire as a review of the literature review, if you like, and that will finish this section off completely. What the other thing you need to do here as well is slightly change around all your formatting. There seems to be a lot of white space here, yeah, so you have to think about your formatting. The next thing now is page 32. Let's come down to page 32. Yeah, I'm not sure why you've got blue here. You've got them in italics. You can keep them in blue if you like, but there's no real need. Okay, as long as you've got appendices and whatever, you'll see that comes through. So that's just a simple thing. In fact, most of what you've got to do now is just some simple putting things together. Now we go to page 40. Okay, the conclusions, right? What you've produced in your conclusions is a general comment, which is basically in some ways what you found out, but it reads like this is what you feel has happened. You must go back and you must refer across the whole of your dissertation, and you must do this and pick out what you found in the field research and what you found in the literature review. But you must do that in the context of the aim and objectives that you set at the very beginning. Now, if you read what it says just here, the strategy of partnering closer to fewer, right? Well, you've made a good statement there, and you've come up with the answers in your work. What you haven't done is you haven't referenced back to those. So you can't say here anything that doesn't reference back to either the literature or the field research. So for example, yeah, the literature has identified the strategy of closer to fewer in the construction industry as a comprehensive and effective theory. You must qualify it like that, because it says then this is where it's come from, right? But in some extent, the field research has identified that it fails to take into account the theory and the reality. So you just keep saying, this is what you found here, this is what you found there, and you bring them together. So what you have to do now is go back and highlight all the main points that you've got from your literature that supports this group of objectives. And what you do is, and also what you've also found with this from your field research. So basically what you say here is, the research was conducted to analyse the concept of closer to fewer. You can do it like that, okay? Yes, all you've got to worry about, you can do it like that. Something that sort of sets the introduction. This is the rationale for this research. You then say objective whatever, 1. And then you write the answer to objective 1 that relates both to the field and desk research. Alright? And if you think about what you've done here, this must relate to one of these. So you put that down, objective 1, then you write this bit, objective 2, and so on. That gives you a framework and a structure for your conclusions. And you keep going back. So what you need to do now is spend a day just going across and identifying all the main points that relate to the objectives. And then just write them down, one after the other, in a framework of the objectives in the conclusions. When you've done that, you would then state something like, analysis of the objectives has identified that the aim of this research was, boom, and you'd say something like, the research has shown that in fact the aim in some ways is correct, but there are certain conditions, or it's completely correct or there isn't. Something like that. You just sort of like going to draw together what the objectives delivered, and then you'd say the hypothesis was tested, right, and it is seen that in this case it was good, in this case it was bad, whatever you found in your research. Your conclusion shouldn't be more than, I would look at 2 pages tops. Okay, so basically you have to not rewrite this, because this is what you've done is good. You have to reference it back to your field and desk research, and you keep saying the field research has identified that, the desk research has identified this, right the way through. Now I hope that makes sense. The next thing is the recommendations. You have to put recommendations in here, and what you would probably say now is that this research was based on, right, a large construction company A, right, or a multinational construction company or something like that. The principle of the research was to identify whether this strategy of closer to fewer was successful within this organisation. You would then say something like, but further research should be expanded into taking into account other organisations with different characteristics, maybe on smaller projects or larger projects or different types of projects, and you just put that down as your recommendation. It's the idea of, well, its research was done on this particular organisation, but it should have then, but further research should take into account more organisations, something like that. Okay. The next thing is, list of references is incredibly small. I'd get rid of the numbers because that's not Harvard. Harvard is just basically the name, and they've got to be done alphabetically, all right, and they're not alphabetically at the moment. And the other question I'd have, so basically it's the name, right, on there, but these are in the author's name are listed alphabetically, and that's what Harvard does. So you've got the referencing right, they're just not done alphabetically, and you may want to think about that some of these here would have been used in your main text, so also put those into your research, your reference section. So in principle there's not much to do, just a slight tidying up, and I think you should be good to go. I hope this feedback was useful.